India currently processes $22 trillion, yes, $22 trillion worth of payments every year. There's been visible buzz about consumer payments-related FinTech, innovation in the consumer space, which we keep hearing about day in, day out, that focuses focuses on the individual, but in B2B or the commercial space, there are many stakeholder interests, and a lot of them are here. Think about the huge implications that automation or technologies could have for the commercial space. American Express, we take a lot of pride in saying that it is a global leader across all commercial payment segments, whether it's small or medium-sized businesses to some of the largest global companies in the world. At a global level, we serve 3.3 million businesses and over 14 million card members in over 200 countries. So, what are we really hearing from stakeholders such as yourself? Emerging trends on corporate payments range from credit capacity to security of data. Security of data is absolutely mission critical to all of us. And importantly, to solutions that are mobile first and are very, very frictionless and easy to use. For businesses, it is about end-to-end payment processing because they're manual, they're costly today. So saving time and saving money in the process become very high priorities. We provide rich access, data, insights, and bring together the network of buyer and supplier relationships, which in turn provide real economic advantage to customers such as yourself.
In our increasingly connected world, cross-border money transfers are on the rise. So isn't it strange that most international money transfers are still so slow, expensive, and unpredictable? Many still rely on multiple intermediaries and outdated technologies that just haven't kept pace with the digital age. That's frustrating for banks and definitely frustrating for their consumer and corporate customers, whose expectations are higher than ever before. And with increased competition from new technologies and entrants, banks increasingly need a solution that puts them back in the lead and leads them into the future. Introducing MasterCard Send. For cross-border payments, MasterCard Send is different. Unlike many of the new digital entrants, MasterCard Send works with banks, helping them modernize their cross-border payment services. One single secure connection to MasterCard Send provides banks with a global reach to consumers and corporates via bank accounts, cards, mobile wallets, and cash-out locations. MasterCard Send is faster, with quicker availability of funds and predictable timing of delivery. Better, leveraging innovative technology that's safe, secure, and future-proofed. Smarter, because it leverages MasterCard's network expertise and the bank's existing settlement relationship with MasterCard. MasterCard is a trusted partner to over 22,000 financial institutions globally, and now we're applying the expertise we've gained in our 50-year history to modernize cross-border transactions. MasterCard Send, the faster, better, smarter way to send money domestically and cross-border. Welcome to the future. Welcome to MasterCard Send for cross-border.
Hey everybody, Tony here. Hope you're doing well. It is Monday, June 11th. Jumping a month ahead here. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. I have some interesting Ripple news for you guys. Now, as you may know, Ripple and American Express have been partners for a while now, as well as Santander Bank. And even as of last year, and this article is from the 16th of November, 2017, on CNBC here, American Express, Santander team up for cross-border payments via blockchain. So there's nothing new here, right? It says payments by American Express business customers on its FXIP platform will now be routed through Ripple's enterprise blockchain network. And we know just recently Santander launched the OnePayFX app, which allows you to instantly transfer money, guys, around the world. So today, American Express, guys, published in their jobs section of their site, jobs.americanexpress.com, a sales coordinator job in Phoenix, Arizona. Well, what's interesting, guys, they mention Ripple in the job description. And I think someone screwed up because here's what's interesting. The initial publication, and here I'm showing you Google's cached version, the initial version that they crawled on the site and picked up and indexed, and then later on, the folks at American Express updated this article or this page and removed the mention of Ripple, probably because they were getting a shit ton of traffic coming to their site because they're mentioning Ripple directly in that job description. So here's what the initial publication said, guys. In 2018, we are introducing a blockchain solution with Ripple and Santander. Big time news. When I say big time, we already know about the partnership, but progress has been made. We're seeing progression, and that means they're going to launch something very soon, as Santander did. So this is great news for Ripple because it shows people are partnering with Ripple and using their technology. And if you recall, Corey Johnson, in one of the questions they did on their YouTube channel, the Ripple YouTube channel, slipped up and said Santander Bank will be using XRapid later this summer. So I believe potentially American Express can also use XRapid, which uses XRP. I think initially they will launch with Xcurrent, as Santander did, to solve the immediate need. But when they have to, they need a bridge asset such as XRP for the different currencies around the world, they will have to use XRapid. So exciting news, and I'm sure American Express was not expecting this much traffic to their job descriptions page for a sales coordinator. So this is very interesting. And guys, we're seeing progress, and it's going to take time. We got to have patience. And as Brad Garlinghouse said, he expects a few banks to go live, major banks. Now, his words were major banks to go live with XRapid later this year and dozens in 2019. So super exciting times. And now he just only mentioned banks. He's not talking about the money transfer companies such as Western Union and MoneyGram and a whole bunch of these other payment service providers. Also, this doesn't include the ecosystems that XRP will be used in, such as Omni and a bunch of others. And, we'll see what other use cases they come up with, because remember, they just partnered with a bunch of universities for blockchain research. So I can imagine they may try to do something there as well. So guys, exciting news. I want to share that with you. As mentioned, if you go to this page right now, it doesn't say Ripple, but if you pull up the earlier version before it was updated, clearly states in 2018, we are introducing a blockchain solution with Ripple and Santander.
Well, it has been a volatile year for cryptocurrencies as they continue to face scrutiny from regulators, but that's not stopping companies from continuing to invest in blockchain. So what does the future look like for the space? Let's send it out to John Fort at the Code Conference, who is joined by the CEO of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse. John.
Thank you, Melissa. Brad, thanks for being here with us. And I want to start off. Your approach at Ripple is different from a lot of the other cryptocurrencies out there. You are trying to enable transactions between banks, movement of large amounts of money in a short period of time. What is the latest as far as Ripple being able to sign up banks for that vision?
Well, it's really been an incredible 2018 for us. We're now signing up more than one bank to a production contract per week. So that's really accelerated over 2017. We announced this morning that we signed the largest bank in Kuwait, the National Bank of Kuwait. So it continues to build, momentum continues to build. And the dynamic there is there's network effects. The more participants, the more value in joining. And so we're seeing that momentum build.
Now, at the same time, a lot of people, when they think of cryptocurrencies, they think of Bitcoin. You staked out arguably a different tack on that. You're trying to be useful and practical is the line that you're saying. But as I look at the charts, XRP, your currency, and Bitcoin are kind of moving very tightly correlated to one another. So what does that do to your story and the ability to sign up institutions like banks for using this for what they hope will be a stable platform?
I think it's an important question. And I think from the earliest days, Ripple kind of staked out a space that said, look, we're not anti-government. We're not working against the banks. We're not trying to circumvent regulation. Instead, we're trying to work with the system. We think the blockchain revolution is really happening, can happen from within the system. It's not going to be attacking the system. So I think you're also right that there is a lot of correlation right now between the entire crypto digital asset market, and you're not seeing that differentiation. I think that's just a matter of time as people better understand the different use cases, as people better understand the utility and the problem that's being solved with these different digital assets. There's obviously been a lot of noise, a lot of hype, and I think it's incredibly important that we stay grounded in, like, what's the real problem? Who's the customer? What's the value being created by solving that problem for those customers?
Saru Kaushal, VP and Country Business Head, Global Commercial Payments, American Express Banking Corp, India. Saru, over to you.
Let me start with an interesting fact. India indeed processed over $22 trillion of payment flows last year. Interestingly enough, to the point of electronification and digitization, only 6% of this was on paper, i.e. checks and demand drafts. And India is pegged in the world order very similarly to all other developed countries. So what are these payments about? These are transactions that are done between corporates, between governments, and between consumers. Removing the inherent inefficiency in a payment ecosystem or a flow is all about driving savings. And why is driving savings important? Because for all of us in this room, it is a boardroom agenda. At Amex, we are partnering with over 3 million companies globally, and these span small companies, mid-sized enterprises, local large market companies, multinational organizations, Fortune 500 organizations, and we endeavor in solving 4 or 5 key things. One is we work alongside them to solve for account payable issues. The second is we work to enable transparency. We work to enable visibility and compliance and drive savings by creating expense management solutions. Another thing we do is work through the account receivable chain. Let me now share with you some real-life examples of how we in American Express have partnered with several companies to deliver on their expense management agenda.
Banks today help customers stretch their purchasing power and plan for the future. But using banks for cross-border payments often ends up costing the most for those who can afford it the least. Say hello to Rahul. He supports his family halfway around the world. He asked his bank to make a transfer, and that's when things got complicated. For payment transfers, banks work with a network of domestic and cross-border banks, each adding fees and time to pass on the transfer. Rahul's family can't afford to wait. To get his money to his family, Rahul had to make a couple of calls, pay 8% for the transfer, and got a poor exchange rate. The whole process took days. Does it have to be this way? What if banks could make payments as simple as sending a text message? Convenient, affordable, and instantaneous, and also data-rich. Enter the blockchain. Instead of weeks, transactions take seconds, and they happen securely with near negligible fees. With blockchain, banks can transact directly with each other because they are part of a trusted network, removing the need for a third party to verify the transaction. Transactions can be pre-authorized, and users can even attach a photo, invoice, or bill of materials. The conversion rate is provided by foreign exchange providers who compete to offer the lowest rates. Blockchain's pathfinding algorithms automatically find the route that delivers the best possible rate. Instead of days, Rahul's family would have received a text in seconds confirming they received the funds. Today, smart banks know they aren't in the banking business, they're in the customer service business, and blockchain-based cross-border payments are just one way of providing clients with a best-in-class experience.
Hi, I'm Ali Patterson. On this episode of FinTech Finance, we're going to be talking with Saxo Payments around some of the issues with cross-border transactions. We also speak with Alipay to hear a little bit around their European expansion. And we catch up with Chris Skinner to get some of his views on fintechs and banks. So firstly, I went to speak with Anders Lacour from Saxo Payments to find out some of his thoughts and views on cross-border transactions.
Cross-border payments, when you talk about the bank transfers, are actually quite complicated, given that you need to access clearing in each country. And each region in the world has different file formats that all have to speak together.
So back to the point about partnership, like you said, there are so many countries in Europe and every country is so different. That's why we need to leverage different partners in different countries, their local know-how and their local network. So we rely on the local partners for cross-border payment. So how the payment works is we settle our partners and they settle the local merchants. I think, in terms of if we talk about this from another angle, the user angle, not the merchant angle, I think it's a tougher question because every country is so different and every country's users is so different. They have different pain points. That's why when we look at the user market here, the first question that we always need to answer is, does all the services we provide in China, would it work in Italy? Would it work in UK? Which services would be most interesting to users in France? So it's a tough question to answer because it's so different. It's so diversified.
Well, a lot of fintech startups begin with an idea that they can be a bank and get rid of these nasty banks that exist today. And then as they start getting into the complexities of the financial system and how it operates and the regulatory structures that go around that system, they begin to fail in their disruptive vision, because to be a bank, you have to be a bank. You've got to be regulated like a bank. And obviously some people think you can get away or around that challenge, such as the Bitcoin libertarians. But they have also encountered so many issues about if you store and transfer money with no regulatory structure or governance, then you have a problem. I mean, when the latest hack of Bitfinex came along, people said this will never happen because you've got the multi-sig structures of Bitcoin that will stop this sort of hack. Well, it's happened. So you need a governance structure, and that's where fintechs have ended up really becoming more partners of banks than challengers of banks. Now, there are some things in fintech that are far more interesting that are augmenting the banking system by providing services to different constituencies that could never be served by banks before. So in that case, we're talking about emerging and developing economies, financial inclusion through mobile wallets. That's a fantastic revolution in sub-Saharan Africa that's taking place right now, Indonesia, Philippines. That's the area where fintech can really make a difference. And if we can get low-cost, real-time transfer between people directly across borders globally through this new fintech structure, that's where I think we're going to see the revolution take place. But it's not going to happen in the banking system.
Is Ripple working with American Express or with Visa?
It's a good question. One of the, I suppose, challenges of working in an industry like this is it's regulated. There's confidentialities. As I mentioned earlier, it has been an incredibly busy couple of days as well. Even this morning, I couldn't get a conference room for a meeting because we had customers who were meeting. So Look, we are working. I'm aware there's some rumors out there. We announce our customer relationships when our partners are ready to announce that, and is part of working with the industry and not kind of trying to surprise them. Right. We will make those announcements when we and our customers are ready.
What's up, guys? Tony here. I wanted to quickly talk about the great news that came out this morning about Ripple. I'm actually on my lunch break right now. As you can see here, I work in Midtown Manhattan. There's the Empire State Building. But Ripple has partnered with American Express. They announced it on their website, and there was a lot of news mentions and financial news pickups and things along that line. This is amazing, amazing news about Ripple. Huge. You have one of the biggest merchant services, card services, American Express, well-known, large clienteles, on board, partnering with them for global merchant payments. Huge. The partnerships just keep going up, and I think, like I said in my other videos, the price of Ripple will slowly increase. In fact, this morning it went up about like 25%. The price of Ripple jumped. I think it's coming back down a bit now, but expect the price to continue to rise. And
hello everyone, and welcome back to Crypto Nomad. My name is Leo, and for today's video, we do have some really great news all around for Ripple XRP, and also a little bit of news for Coinbase. So starting with the biggest news for Ripple XRP here, guys. Today was the last day at the Conference Money 2020, where actually there was a conversation, really interesting conversation between American Express and Ripple. And the topic was changing the cross-border payments experience for small and medium-sized enterprises. So small to medium enterprises, guys, they do make up the backbone of both dominant and emerging economies today. And those sorts of companies, it's something that we've been talking about in some of my previous videos. They do suffer some of the biggest problems when moving money with cross-border payments. Basically, mostly because, as it says here, scrolling down the article, they need to move small amounts of money at high speed and with certainty. The problem is that they don't believe that this is happening. So according to the VP and General Manager of American Express of Global Commercial Commerces UK and Russia, 71% of the small medium to enterprises believe cross-border payments are problematic. And within that panel, guys, Marcus Treacher, the Ripple's SVP of Customer Success, was also in that meeting. And I'm going to get to the point where it really gets an interesting moment between the two companies. So as it even stated by the general manager, Ripple offers instantaneous point-to-point conversation between sender and receiver of funds. And that provides a real opportunity to alleviate most of the issues of our customers that they are now facing. American Express distinctly understands the issues that the small medium enterprises face with traditional banking, from cross-border payments to access of credit. The company's open forum is a highly regarded and popular platform for resources and support to help small to medium businesses grow. Together with Ripple, the companies are working to address the problems that their customers face with cross-border payments.
Stay tuned. Next question. dLocal, one of the large payment providers, is now on RippleNet. Can we expect to see them use XRapid for GoDaddy and for Uber?
Yeah, I also like this question. It's kind of consistent with what I talked about before. For all of these payment providers and even banks, if we can lower their cost, if we improve efficiency by even 10 basis points, the capital will flow to the most efficient path. Yep. And so, again, we don't pre-announce customers until we're ready to talk about those customers. But I think that we are already seeing real traction with XRapid that we're publicly obviously already talking about. And I think as more people understand how that is making payments more efficient and lower cost, I'm very optimistic that we'll be working with lots of customers for that use case.
Fantastic. There's another rumor that seems to be floating around, or at least somebody online shared. Alipay, rumors that they can make a 3-second payment cross-border. Does that mean Ripple has competition in the form of Alipay? Or are they using XRP?
So I don't know the details of what's being referenced there. You know, anytime you're on one ledger, if everyone's on Alipay, then you can make things efficiently on that same ledger. Look, the reality is we live in a world where there's a lot of ledgers. You know, the kind of foundation and what Stefan, our CTO, talked about up here on the stage yesterday was interoperability. Not everyone's going to be on Alipay. And settling between Alipay and Paytm and PayPal, and by the way, B of A and Standard Chartered and Santander, this is the Internet of Value. That's how Ripple has, from our inception, evangelized the opportunity to create an Internet of Value. In the catalyzing that Internet of Value, it's connecting the repositories of value. It's connecting Alipay. It's connecting Standard Chartered. It's connecting Santander. It's connecting dLocal. It's, you know, as we bring those together, we're increasing, frankly, we're increasing the efficiency for global commerce, period.
Another mainstream adoption of cryptocurrencies, and this time it is MoneyGram getting in on the action. Shares of MoneyGram climbed the most in 10 months after saying it was working with the blockchain startup Ripple. It'll be testing the use of cryptocurrency to move funds. Let's bring in our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, who is in New York, who's been covering this story. So they mentioned speedier transactions here, Corey. What does this mean?
So when I first ever heard about Bitcoin, when I first thought about Bitcoin, I think for a lot of people, their first notion of Bitcoin and then later cryptocurrency and blockchain, you got to think about the business of Western Union and MoneyGram, moving money across borders, getting it there quickly with lower fees. If you are a foreign worker working in the U.S. and you're trying to get money home to your family, you go to the 7-Eleven and try to transfer money using MoneyGram, using Western Union, a Western Union store. The fees are enormous and outrageous, and the process is slow. The idea that you could move money like you could move email is a dream, and that's what Bitcoin seems to promise. That's certainly what Ripple seems to promise. MoneyGram and Ripple are absolutely in competition with each other. To see these two businesses come together and see MoneyGram look at a way to move money faster is an amazing thing. It will give them a leg up over competitors like Western Union, but it also massively erodes their business model. It's interesting to see these guys, I think, probably smartly recognize that they've got to get ahead of this train or they're going to be under the tracks.
So, we've spoken to the Ripple CEO recently. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about the future of cryptocurrency as he sees it.
There's no doubt 2017 has been, amongst other things, the year of crypto. And within the year of crypto, XRP has outperformed every other digital asset out there. So year to date, as that chart showed, we're up about 20,000%.
It's interesting to compare Bitcoin to, a slower sort of credit card-like transaction. Do you think that cryptocurrencies like Ripple or Ethereum could surpass Bitcoin or come close?
Well, look, I think that that's why this show exists, right? It's so we can have an understanding of what these technologies are, not just show squiggly lines on a screen. And when we get to a place where we're talking about the efficacy of blockchain technologies and even currencies that use blockchain, rather than the price is up, the price is down, that's when we've elevated into a conversation about actually what these things are and what they might be as a business.
It's the marks. Ready?
FX は SBI FX トレード
J2 ロコ Welcome to another edition of Blockchain Insider Interviews. I'm Sam Maul. We're in Toronto in easily the coolest building that I've been in the past 2 days. I think that's safe to say. We're with Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, wearing an incredibly nice suit, which I wasn't expecting.
Thank you. We went in Rome. We're here at Sibos as a banking conference, a lot of banking meetings, so you got to wear the part.
And your staff has asked me to point out the socks, Michael, if you would pan down. They do match the tie. They match the concept of Swell. You have your own conference called Swell. Most importantly, the name came from?
Swell, really, there's a lot of Ripple water metaphors in what we do. Our core product is called X Current. The next product we launched is called X Rapid. So Swell is kind of building on the kind of water theme of what Ripple is doing and kind of spreading the ripples around everything we're doing.
That effect, right? That constantly
exactly.
goes.
I mean, ultimately, as you know, Ripple is really focused on how do we enable an internet of value? How do we make value move the way information moves today? And that's our big kind of multi-year, 10-year view of how the world will evolve. And it's really how do we dial that back and to make it tactical and real today and tomorrow. And I think if you want to enable an internet of value, you've got to connect the repositories of value. Right. And the repositories of value, as big as the Bitcoin value proposition is today, the banks own trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of assets. So if we want to enable an internet of value, we've got to connect the banks and payment service providers and MSBs, and we're excited to have made a bunch of progress on that.
So how are you feeling with the conference so far? This is the inaugural event for this. We'll talk about the timing and some other things that are happening in Toronto, but overall, how do you think the conference has gone after your first day?
Look, I'm thrilled, and I will admit, there's a certain nervousness when you have your inaugural event. Things running smoothly, are people going to show up? Yesterday we had kind of our lead keynote with Ben Bernanke, interviewed by Gene Sperling.
I was going to come there, by the way. So if you're going to have your first event, Ben Bernanke, nice. You got Sir, you got Sir Tim Berners-Lee coming up. You've got Don Tascott.
You have Stefan Thomas and Vitalik this afternoon. That should be great.
Yeah, you when you look at the speaker list and the buzz that we've heard maybe at a different conference that's going on, which we will talk about. Well done. Right?
Thank you.
The way to do a conference.
So as for the inaugural event, I'm thrilled. I think there's always things you'll learn and we can do better, but to some degree we're trying to be the unconference relative to the Sibos. I think we did try to be complementary with some of what they're doing, but Ripple has been fortunate. We've got a lot of customers, and we heard last year our customers, they want to hear more from us, and we felt like the best way to do that is to set up shop here, and it's been great so far. It's been very busy. Packed house for Bernanke and a bunch of the sessions yesterday. I expect the same today.
I want to invite Dilip Rao, Global Head of Infrastructure Innovation from Ripple. Round of applause for him. Arkadaşlar koltukların 2 tanesini alır mıyız? Altu. Koltukların 2 tanesini alır mıyız? Yeah, I just told them to take those 2 chairs off the stage because we're gonna be just talking 2 of us, so we don't need 4. So, thanks for coming.
No, thank you for having me, and this is my first time in Turkey, so
yeah, is it?
Having a great time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. I mean, I believe you're going to have lots of questions, so I'm going to be quick, asking you a few questions, then I'm going to leave the word to the audience because I believe they want to ask a lot.
Sure.
I mean, let's start I just want to give the ball to you, so it's going to be easier to start. What is Ripple? What is its mission, and what is its vision? So if you start from there, then probably we're going to have more to talk.
Sure. Thanks, Hada. So really, in a one-line sentence, Ripple's mission is to try to create the Internet of Value. And the way we mean that and parse that is, if I have to send you an email today, there really is very little friction in sending your email. I don't ask you, does my ISP talk to your ISP? Is your ISP up today, or are you closed for the weekend? I send you email and it gets to you. It's cheap, it's fast, it's frictionless. So we want to make the exchange of value similarly easy, cheap, frictionless. And that we call the Internet of Value. That's kind of our broad vision. Our founder, Chris Larsen, has sort of 3 different startups behind him, successful, working with some founders who came out of the Bitcoin blockchain movement, came up with the original plan, and Ripple's come out of their vision. Our focus from a mission point of view within that broad vision is to remove the friction in cross-border payments. So we've chosen that. Our CEO is a chap called Brad Garlinghouse. He was well known in Yahoo for having written what is called the Peanut Butter Manifesto. He accused Yahoo of spreading themselves too thin. And he was probably prescient in terms of his assessment. So his mantra at Ripple is very much about focus. So we're trying to solve for cross-border payments. And really, that informs everything we do. We're probably one of the oldest companies in the space. In Silicon Valley, being 5 years old means you're probably about 10 years old in the real world. And we started up in late 2012. And initially we came up with a very straightforward public ledger, which is called the XRP ledger. But as we took that to market, specifically to banks, they told us all the things they hated about it. And so if we had to create a solution that banks were going to use, we had to really take the best bits of distributed ledger technology, but then solve for their specific use case. So I think in general, this technology is evolving. And I think what some of the learnings we came to were around, not that my blockchain is better than your blockchain, because we think there'll be 1,000 blockchains for different use cases and be optimized for those use cases. So what we've been spending the last couple of years is really on, I think one of the other speakers touched on this, which is interoperability. It has too many syllables to be catchy, but we think the key problem is connecting blockchains and connecting networks. So we come up with again, a technology called the Interledger protocol. If you go to interledger.org, this is a W3C committee that's running this development of this standard, which is primarily around connecting networks as well.
So you said that your mission is to remove friction from global payments. Can you give us more examples? Like, what are you really doing to make this happen? Not you, but Ripple is doing to make this happen?
So look, firstly, you have to understand how cross-border payments work today.
Yep.
And we think that distributed ledger technology has a great fit to the problem. So I think a lot of people are racing around trying to solve for child poverty and world hunger, with blockchain. Whereas the way banks work today is if you want to move money, let us say, from Germany to Turkey, then somebody wants to send money out of a German bank account, that bank has to take their money and then has to basically send the money across to somebody who also has a leg in Turkey. So typically this happens through somebody called a correspondent bank. So the correspondent bank has a leg in Germany, has a leg in Turkey, which means they can use the domestic system in Germany to take the money from the German bank and use the domestic system in Turkey to pay out to the beneficiary bank. What this means is you have multiple ledgers being updated. So initially, the German bank has to update its ledger to say, I'm going to debit John and I'm going to pay out to the correspondent. The correspondent has to update their ledger to move that across borders. And locally in Turkey, another ledger has to be updated to get the final money to the beneficiary. So you have multiple ledger updates happening at different points in time. And the way all of this works is really 70s technology. You have batch files being passed around and being processed. So it is fraught with error. It might take 2 to 3 days. You might have taken the money from the sender in Germany, but you have not completed the delivery of money to the beneficiary in Turkey. And it could fail in between. So it is prone to error, anywhere from 6 to 12% errors. It's expensive because of so many handoffs. Everybody wants a little, clip on the way. And what this results in is really a high friction process to move money. So what Ripple has done is sort of created, firstly, a set of solutions for banks to use, which primarily allows them to share a ledger between just the parties to the transaction. So we use a validation mechanism which has been tailored for that purpose. So it gives them all of the benefits of immutability, of having algorithmic validation, but it is not party, you don't have anybody other than the parties to the transaction involved in the transaction. So this keeps the banks very comfortable because of the privacy, reputational issues, but also scalability issues. Now, none of this uses cryptocurrency. And the reason for that is the initial implementation is all about connectivity. So we're solving the problem of creating an atomic transaction between the bank in Germany and the bank in Turkey so that the debit at one end is accompanied by credit at the other. So you can guarantee settlement. You can actually exchange information about the transaction up front so the sender knows what it's going to cost, when it's going to get delivered, and get a confirmation of delivery. So I like to tell banks that the service is not about sending of money, it's about the receipt of money. So if I know that my mom's got the money, that's what I'm paying for. So we're trying to solve that, with both the messaging layer and the settlement using the RippleLedger or ILP technology. The second part of it is going to be, how do we use a digital asset? And that solves a second problem, which is of liquidity. So when a bank wants to make a payment in Turkey, somebody has to have the money in Turkey to deliver. The German bank may not have that. So what they will often do is have an account at the correspondent bank where they're holding Turkish lira. So they're holding money in probably 20, 30, 40, 50 countries around the world for these payments to be made. Altogether, there's about $27 trillion being held in these so-called nostro-vostro accounts around the world. Now, if one bank is holding in 100 different currencies, as you can imagine, that's an expensive exercise. So small banks can't do that in many countries because they don't have the balance sheet for it. So using a digital asset like XRP, which is the asset native to the RippleLedger, a bank could, for example, just hold XRP, and whenever they wanted Turkish lira, they could buy it from somebody by exchanging XRP for it. Or if they wanted euros, they could buy euros. So if you only had to use one asset, which is instantly translatable into 20, then typically it means you have to hold less money overall. So it optimizes for liquidity. It makes it feasible to exchange instantly and settle using a digital asset that has no counterparty risk. So the elimination of nostros is one use case. The other is as a bridge currency. So today, where you have pairs of currency which are not very liquid, you might have to go through US dollars, which means that every time Mr. Trump tweets, your transaction is getting affected because the US dollar might go up and down. Whereas if you had ultimately a digital asset that had no counterparty risk, there was no central bank running it, it meant that you'd have a very neutral bridging currency. So that's kind of our second solution. But it's early days in the digital asset space. It's a completely new asset class. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation, so there's a lot of volatility. And volatility is not good for that industry. So we are helping at this stage to create more liquidity using XRP. And ultimately, it'll take some time before financial institutions start to use that, which will then solve both the problems of atomicity of transactions, which gives you 24/7 speed and certainty of settlement, but also the use of a digital asset for liquidity management, which then solves the problem of how much money do I need to have to be able to make all these payments around the world.
I see.
It's kind of a long answer to your short question.
It's okay. It's good. It's good. It's good. So, just I realized something. You call it digital assets.
Yeah.
You don't say cryptocurrency or crypto assets or anything. Is there a reason for that? I'm just asking. I mean, you don't need to.
No, very deliberately.
Maybe a company policy.
No, very deliberately. Yeah. So we have positioned XRP really as a digital asset for use by financial institutions, really on a wholesale basis. So right now, the XRP ledger is a public ledger. It is really a ledger of liabilities. So what I mean by that is you can take money from somebody and issue a balance on the RippleLedger. You can take gold, you deposit gold with somebody and you can issue a balance in gold on the RippleLedger. So any kind of a liability that you have can be issued on the RippleLedger. The validation of transactions is through consensus. So the use of XRP is probably threefold. I guess I told you about two of them already as a substitute for nostros, as a bridge currency. And initially, it was also a mechanism to stop denial of service attacks on the network. So really, it was never designed for buying coffee. So our positioning for XRP is really as a wholesale digital asset. And we're licensed to sell that out of a fund that we have in New York as exactly that, for that purpose.
So you're saying, I mean, it's mostly used by banks, but is it only for banks now? Or do you think there will be some other use cases?
So I think the starting point was certainly this primary use case for cross-border transactions. Now, we've gone there because obviously there's big money there. and therefore you want to solve
But
big,
maybe bank or
big
something else as
problems. So we have many, now a lot of MSBs or PSBs, beginning to sign up to Ripple because they compete with banks. So we are not saying that this is only for banks or only for somebody else, but really, ultimately, all of these financial institutions have to transact with each other, and they'll do that only if they know and trust each other. So from that point of view, joining the club means that we're creating a RippleNet club, which, for the first time, in 40 years, there's a new network coming together of both banks and financial institutions who want to use this technology, but also what we call the Ripple rulebook to be able to transact comfortably with each other. So they will use XRP, we hope. Initially, MSBs are using the XRP. They're using pilots, for example, people like MoneyGram, Coalix in US, Mexico, etc. But ultimately, once banks get more comfortable, the volatility comes down, some of the big money comes into it, the regulators get more comfortable with the use of this as a digital asset. So our general view to regulators is, don't just think about this class as being good or bad. You have to figure out, what is being done with it. What is the use case? And certain use cases perhaps are not good, and you want to sort of regulate those much more strongly. Other use cases probably are very benign, and it should be encouraged because it allows the intrinsic cost structure of banking to be more efficient.
And I don't know if you share any numbers, but do you have a bank partner in every country, or is there a number for that?
So we have today probably over 100 clients who have committed to signing up to RippleNet. We're probably signing now one a week in terms of both PSPs, and banks. So we've gotten over that initial hurdle. The thing with banking is, regardless of what they say about innovation, they'll do an innovation project. But to go into production with a service that they've exposed to their clients, they're very, very anxious about that. And so they want to make sure, they want to kick all the tires, they want to do pilots, they want to see everybody else doing it before they jump in. But now, for example, Santander has, this quarter, released an app, which is being used in 4 countries, in Spain, in Brazil, in Poland, and the UK. Now, Santander is a big $1 trillion Spanish bank, and they've taken, a while to get there, but now they're going all out to say, using the Ripple technology, we can deliver for you in all of these countries cross-border payments within seconds, which ultimately that's going to be a competitive advantage, for them. Once that kind of thing happens, every other bank says, right, I got to do that. So that starts to now get more and more banks, signed up. So the last, I've been with Ripple now since the middle of 2014. I spent the last few years basically running the Asia Pacific and MENA business, for Ripple. I've just changed hats this year, and now I'm beginning to work with central banks and with financial market infrastructures. Not to educate them, because we've already been doing that for several years, but to actually have them using our technology to solve problems. Because we think you can learn by doing. And I think that if regulators start to get more comfortable with, what are the goods and bads, how does this work, how does this not work, what are some limitations, then I think there'll be a whole acceptance of this technology by the financial ecosystem.
So should we expect a good move from central banks in the coming future?
Already, for example, last month we had the central bank in Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority. So that's a project that I kicked off with them, where they brought about 15 banks to the table, with a deep dive on Ripple technology, both for the banks and for SAMA. And their initial concern was, should we put a sandbox around this technology? But once their regulators got, into the nitty-gritty, with us and their banks, understood how the bank's going to implement it, they said, no, we don't think there's a need for a sandbox. Go for it, and if you want to use it, use it. That kind of comfort coming from a central bank in many economies, especially in emerging markets, is very powerful. In India, when I first started selling there, they said, what does the Reserve Bank of India think about Ripple? And I said, well, why are you asking me? Why aren't you going to ask the central bank? We said, no, we can't do anything unless the RBI is going to be approving of it. So, of course, we spent time with the RBI. And I said, yes, this is technology between banks go for your life.
I mean, I know that like in Turkey, there's also interest into cryptocurrencies, blockchain, or whatever you want to call it. Like there's an interest in this technology, and let's see what will happen. But I know that there's a working group, and they're really like working on the strategies around it.
Yeah, so I think there is certainly some policy work, being done. But as you know, we already have a client in Turkey, which is Akbank. So they're the first Turkish bank that we signed up here. There is interest from other banks as well.
I mean, there's no exclusivity or anything in your business.
No, not at all.
You can work with anyone. Like,
Correct. So I mean, ultimately, it's a utility service that all banks will join, and the more connectivity there is more value.
I mean, you have only one client in Turkey, but probably you're going to have more soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know everyone is expecting me to ask that question, but I mean, asking that question doesn't make sense, does it? You know what? I know what you want to ask him. Yeah. So, Dilip, we are just on our own here. Yeah, we are just friends.
Yes.
In Turkey, we really encourage friendship. We really, and we really feel close to you now.
Very good.
I feel like I know you for long years. What happened to Ripple price? Why is it so down now? Is it going to go up? Really?
Is it a surprise? Well, nobody was challenging me with this question, in December last year, I can tell you. Look, we think really, if I could answer that question to you and tell you what was going to happen tomorrow.
But I'm just kidding. I know that you can say it, but just whatever you can get from you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I could tell you anything, then I'd have to kill you. But we don't want to do that. It would be very impolite. We just think that this is at the very, very early stage, and so obviously there's a lot of speculation. Certain countries are very keen on crypto in general. So Japan, for example, Japan has been one of our great success stories. We have 61 banks that have joined together in a consortium to use Ripple, not only for cross-border payments, but they actually want to use it for domestic clearing and settlement, which is quite cool because, Japan has a very old system which is in dire need of change. But in general, when I visited Japan in 2016 and I met with the Bank of Japan, they were asking more questions about crypto than anybody else. So, Mt. Gox originally, Japan. So I think they have more comfort than any other country. And I think similarly, Korea has been huge in terms of take-up and following of that. But also that means there is a lot of volatility because of, some news item, and then they go, let's dump it and, take it up. I think obviously in the initial period, it was like, hey, if a Bitcoin can hit 20,000 and Ripple is at, I don't know, a few cents, there is upside potential. Our view is that ultimately the value of these assets is going to be determined by the use case. So the question is, what is the use case for Bitcoin? I don't want to challenge, the market leader, so to speak, in terms of branding anyway, but who can afford to pay, $15, $20, to make a transaction? So the original idea of that being, a currency for making trades between each other is probably gone with the wind. Ripple, we think, ultimately the price for transactions is determined by the folks in the consensus, and it is still fractions of a cent. So it's still the cheapest, it's still the fastest, 3 to 5 seconds. We've done 35 million ledger closes, since we began, throughput of 1,500 transactions a second. So from all of those perspectives, it's a very solid, platform. What we're using with banks today is something based on the Interledger protocol because they didn't want to use the public ledger. But ultimately, when they use XRP for liquidity, that's when the two will converge. So from a use case point of view, we think we still have a solid platform, a solid base as to what is the problem being solved. Is it a big problem? And who is ultimately going to use XRP? And in our case, we think it's going to be financial institutions, it's going to be market makers who want to come in and play in that business. And it's a huge, as I mentioned, a $27 trillion base that is there today. So if you go by that, I'm not selling my XRP.
Like $2, $3 soon?
No, just kidding. Don't worry. So normally we're out of time, but I want to get some questions if you have. Obviously you have, yeah. Can we hit the microphone? Let's start with her here. Şuradan başlayalım hanımefendiden. Şuradan hanımefendiden başlayalım.
Thank you so much for this nice talk. And as far as I can pick from your sentences, there's this Japanese banks they just create the majority of the banks which have just joined to your network. So any of the banks have already started using XRPs with your technology right now?
No, so the first people who are using XRP in a pilot mode, and I think we've been public about all of this, from day one, are more MSBs. So, I mean, the first MSBs are regulated, but they are usually much more, forward-thinking, want to try out stuff before the banks will. So, for example, MoneyGram, which is a big, remittance company, is beginning to trial that. We've had a company called Qualix, which is an old, very well-established company in the US, using it to move money between the US and Mexico. We've given them a product which now is still in beta, but will be made available for commercial use shortly, which basically allows the exchange to take US dollars, buy XRP at an exchange in the US, move that XRP to an exchange in Mexico, have that sold into Mexican pesos in Mexico. And our product will coordinate all of those transactions so that upfront you can know, okay, if I have 100 US dollars, how many pesos will I get? And so the MSB has certainty in terms of what is going to be delivered, what price is going to be delivered at, what are the FX rates involved, and being able to synchronize all of those, using our product. So we're still in the early stages. In that model, the MSB doesn't have to hold any XRP. So the exchange is taking the risk of holding XRP and the volatility of that. And that's the starting point. And you have to think about this is brand new territory. Nobody has done this ever. So you have to take baby steps and get everybody comfortable, with it. We're doing retail remittances to start. Why? There's low value, because the liquidity is not deep in these markets. So if somebody wanted to do a corporate transaction, that's immediately like $10, $100 million. There's not enough liquidity for it. So banks will watch that and say, right, how's that going? And is that cheaper? Is it faster? Is it better? Because banks want somebody else to try it out and say, okay, that works. Maybe now we'll jump in. Actually, back in 2016, we did a project with 12 banks to use XRP between themselves, just as a technical trial. They loved it. It didn't work. They said, okay, instead of having a multiplicity of account relationships that we have to have with each other, 12 banks would have had to have 144 relationships with each other. They just used XRP and moved it between each other and said, this works. So they've already tried that out. And we know that that's the holy grail. But they will take time to get there. And regulators also have to feel comfortable. The volatility has to come down, as I've mentioned. The markets have to get deeper. This just takes time. So at this point, to answer your question directly, we don't have a bank that is using it, but we have MSBs starting to trial it. But my expectation is that sooner rather than later, banks will use it because it makes sense.
Hi, so I'll just stand up. So my question is, why is the circulating supply of XRP around 39 billion, and what does it mean if the maximum supply is 100 billion?
So, just a bit of history then, as you know, that the founders of the XRP ledger gifted about 80% of the 100 billion XRP to Ripple, the company, and formed the company. The idea was, okay, you go build out the ecosystem. We've invented the tech. Now you go out and create a network, a community around it. So what Ripple has done is taken about 55 billion of the XRP that we have and put it into escrow. And the idea is, again, to provide stability of supply. So every month, we have 1 billion Ripple, XRP available for us to do whatever we want with. If you don't use it, it goes to the back of the queue. It's all under a smart contract. And the idea is to say, we will dribble this out so that there is not an immediate, big overhang of XRP on the marketplace. But ultimately, all of that XRP will be owned by institutions that want to use it, and whether they use it for nostro replacement or they use it as a bridge currency or potentially for other use cases. So we are certainly beginning to now look at what are the other use cases you can have for this, given the high-performing network that we have. So it will take time, but as that is used to sort of create deeper markets, I think the utility of XRP will in fact grow, and that's kind of where we are headed with it.
One last question.
With a different person.
It's you again?
No, we go to somebody else.
Yeah, let's get here. Unfortunately, this is going to be the last question because we are.
Yeah, it's pretty much linked to the first question actually. So my question is, when I look at it, so Ripple and XRP are kind of abstracted, right, currently. So they don't have an organic bond between each other. So Ripple has its own network using a different protocol and actually does not XRP to do its business, right? Currently you're signing agreements with the banks and you do and you provide all these services, money transfer, cross-border money transfer services at that pace. So, and you're doing it without XRP. So back to the first question that's been asked to you. So what is the motive of Ripple to get the banks onto XRP? So it might be the founders' XRP tokens that they have in hand. That might be one thing. What is the other driver for you to move that way, that direction?
So I guess you can look at it as, XRP ultimately is a tool, to back to our vision, which was when I started off by saying, the internet of value and the removal of friction in cross-border payments. And the sources of friction that we identified were, the lack of atomicity of transactions. And we bridged that, with the ILP ledger. And the second one was about liquidity. And we think that XRP solves that problem significantly. So it is directly applicable, to our vision, to our mission, which is currently focused on cross-border payments. So I think it makes sense, but it'll take time for banks to accept that. But the job that we are doing is really spending the time educating banks, getting them to try out stuff. My work is with the regulators to say, here, try it out, see what happens, bring your banks to the table, and let's have an experiment and see how comfortable we can get with it. But all of our activities are geared towards using the tools that we have. It's a combination of technology, but also the digital asset to solve for this problem. So, there's nothing else that we are doing every day. So I don't wake up in the morning thinking something else. I'm still focused on cross-border payments, the internet of value, and the use of our software and the digital asset that we have, which is what we can apply to it.
Hadi seni de soralım. Let's get one more question. Benim alkışladığınız soruya izin verdin diye. Teşekkür ederim.
Hello. What is the utility of the XRP token to the average consumer?
At this stage, for the cross-border use case, probably none. But you might see over the next few months or this year, additional use cases come out, using XRP. And, if some of those are consumer-oriented, I won't be surprised. But at this point in time, for what we are doing and what we publicly announced, I would say it's very much focused on wholesale, banks, financial institutions. That's where we see the utility of XRP. But I wouldn't rule out, other use cases which might be more consumer-oriented.
Yes. Do you really want to ask that question? Because he was like this. Okay, go ahead then.
Really quick. Do you see Corda protocol as a threat to your business, or do you find any competitive side of Ripple and Corda platform?
So, my view on competition and generally is it's good to have competition. I started pitching Ripple in 2014 when all we had was the XRP ledger, and I said, here's a cool platform for you to settle. And banks looked at me blankly and said, we don't understand this, and how do we do the messaging? And so they wanted a full solution. So our journey has been in taking basically very, fundamentally innovative technology, but then packaging it into a full solution for banks. That's taken us, 3 to 5 years. We are at release 4.0 shortly. Corda is at 1, I guess. So there is a way to go for them. But the good thing about it is it legitimizes the space. If we were the only company with a solution, banks would say there must be something wrong. Why isn't IBM doing it? And why isn't anybody else doing it? So the fact that other people are doing it legitimizes it. And it's easier for a bank to make a choice rather than say, it's Ripple or nothing. So my initial 3 years, people ask me, who's your competitor? I go, there's nobody. Now at least I can say, well, maybe you can have a look at a couple of others, and they'll pick us because we are still better.
So, I think we are, oh, thank you. Okay, one more question. Sorry for that.
That's all right.
I just wanted to ask, what is XCurrent?
So XCurrent is the product that we built specifically for banks. XCurrent sits behind a bank's firewalls. It has 2 components. It has a messaging layer that talks to other XCurrents at other banks on a peer-to-peer basis. It's bidirectional information exchange. And the second component of that is a RippleLedger, so the 2 banks can exchange information about liquidity balances. So typically, as I mentioned, a bank has a Nostro account, a German bank has a Turkish lira account at a bank in Turkey. They'll be able to see exactly how much money they have. They'll be able to do an atomic transaction between 2 banks using those Ripple ledgers. So that is the XCurrent product that we sell to banks, and that is based on what we call the Interledger protocol, which gives banks an immutable transaction. It gives them a validation mechanism, which is 24/7, algorithmic. So it has all the benefits of cryptographic certainty, distributed ledger, atomicity of transaction, and they love it.
So banks don't actually use XRP to transfer across borders?
No, so as I said, the XCurrent product, the way it's implemented today, uses fiat currencies. So the convergence that we see coming in the next phase is for banks to have an option to say, do I want to use XRP? So instead of the German bank holding Turkish lira, they could say, Akbank, are you able to accept XRP and give me Turkish lira? Here's 100 lira worth of XRP. Here's 1,000,000 lira worth of XRP. And instantly, that can be settled without having to hold balances. So that's the holy grail. That's the ultimate end goal that we're aiming for. But if you don't have connectivity, you can't even start. So first you get the banks connected. They do what they're doing today better. They like it. They build new services on it. Then they go, I want to do this in 100 countries, but I can't hold currencies in 100 countries. Well, guess what? You got XRP. So it's a phase strategy, but that's the way banking works.
I really enjoyed talking to you. It's really nice, and I think we received good questions as well, and you gave us everything really honestly, and it was really nice talking to you here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making this happen.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.